All right, guys, welcome to DLH.io live streams, one of our first live streams out here. And we're in a new platform, new feature set with how we're streaming, how we're going live. And we want to take this particular topic as kind of apropos with some things that have been happening out in the world. And so this topic is around Snowflake security concerns. And so we've been working on something for a little while. Actually, we've got many customers who are utilizing today our SOC compliance helper for Snowflake. And it's a new concept to some, but because of recent events, like I said, it might make sense to really dive into this a little deeper and perhaps make it even one of the main feature sets of DLH.io. And just a reminder, obviously, Snowflake partner, been working with Snowflake for many years now. And for those accounts that are out there where the customers are thinking, hey, how did this happen? How do we prevent this? What should we be thinking about from a security concern perspective? This is just a really high level overview of things that Snowflake customers with multiple accounts, single account, org should be thinking about, and how we've started to help customers at least highlight a few things around security. And then there's just some other principles that are out there related to best practices for security, really with data in general, but particularly with data in the cloud. And a lot of the same principles from on-premise apply into the cloud. Oftentimes people think, hey, going into the cloud, everything is completely secure, it's brand new, so we should trust everything. And while cloud security is top notch, one thing that we're going to point out in this live stream, this presentation, is that really from your perspective as an account holder of really any SaaS-based or cloud-based system, there is some responsibility for you as the account holder. So we're going to talk about some of that as well. So let's just go ahead and dive into it. If you do have any questions, put them into the comments. We'll try to catch them as we go along. This is going to be a fairly brief overview presentation in this stream, just showing up here based on some recent highlights and concerns over security. So give us some feedback, let us know what you think, and we'll talk about how anybody can get their hands on what we're going to show you today. That's going to help you as a Snowflake account holder with security and security visibility. All right, let's dive into it. Okay, so we've talked about the Snowflake security concerns, but why is this really relevant today? And we're going to call out a few attributions and things like that. But if you just do a quick Google search on Snowflake security breach, you're going to get some relevant results that are talking about very recent events. And so if you think about this applies to any Snowflake customer that's out there today and thinking of security in a much more heightened sense. So this simple search returned a few results from very popular media outlets like Wired and TechCrunch. So I want to call out, and again, you can Google this for yourself, and I think Snowflake's actually put out some sort of notice, but allegedly, there was some data breach, and allegedly it was tracked back to Snowflake and there was talk about compromised data. Now, we've seen data leaks before out in the wild, and it just seems a bit maybe odd this happened from a Snowflake perspective. But we're gonna talk about how this could be mitigated, as well as how we can have visibility into things within your Snowflake account. So these recent events really should draw your attention to your Snowflake security. Now, when we think about all the commentary and all the recent highlights about this security breach, really, what is that telling us? If you read into the details, it's telling us that, hey, there was a breach, but Snowflake is really a hosted SaaS platform, meaning that every individual account is really separated. And not to go into great technical detail, but this is one of the reasons Snowflake is very performant. It can operate in all the major clouds. That's Google Cloud, that's Azure, that's AWS. And so that can align with your organization's ecosystem, or you can establish a Snowflake account outside of your ecosystem in a different provider, right? If you're trying to have some sort of diversity to your data architecture footprint. And we know several Snowflake customers that actually do that for differing reasons. Now, when we look at some of these headlines, one thing to take note of is that because Snowflake is that managed system, that there is a little bit of an onus on the Snowflake customer themselves to manage their own security. So when you're inside of Snowflake and you create a new user inside of your Snowflake account, that user is represented only in your account. And so if you think back to the days of having on-premise systems, you typically would have a database administrator. And that database administrator, that network administrator, would be in charge of things like creating secure users, passwords, policies, etc. And one of the selling points of having cloud-based systems is that you could potentially do away with some of that resource overhead. Now, we've always been an advocate that inside of the cloud, especially with data infrastructure, data architecture, you do need people who know what they're doing, and a lot of that translates from an on-premise world. So maybe don't call them a database administrator, but maybe let's call them a cloud data warehouse administrator, as an example. And either as you're transitioning from on-premise or you're a brand new enterprise to having cloud data infrastructure, there still is that need for someone to administer your system, whether you do that through some sort of managed support or you have that as an internal resource. So if we move on a little bit here and we talk about how security issues impact the world of data, there's a report out stating that 45% of companies working with data encounter some type of security impact during their journey. And it's difficult to calculate the cost for the loss of data, the issues with integrations, whether that be upstream or downstream, identifying where that issue comes from. Then, of course, the impact on any of your analytical tools when you have internal customers or external customers who come to rely on the data that you're managing or the analytics or the reports that you're managing. And this is becoming even more relevant in today's generative AI push and the relevancy that data has on it. So this type of impact on reporting and really the end user, the end customer, the consumer of the data, internally, we've seen that in the past reflect in some concepts known as shadow IT, right? When you try to centralize your data systems and then you have breaches or you have other problems, it really starts opening people's avenues up to saying, well, how can we trust the data? How can we trust our own internal team that's supposed to be managing the data? We're going to go out and do our own thing. And that's one of the reasons this shadow IT concept came about in on-premise years and years, decades ago at this point, right? And some of that is still relevant in today's cloud infrastructure and cloud architecture worlds. And so when you think about, hey, it's a good idea to have security constraints and visibility and things like that, ideas are nothing without execution. So until you are actually doing something about it proactively, everything's going to be retroactive in your environment, in your system. And that not only applies for, the topic here, but that's everything across the board. So one of the things people are doing today is trying to understand how they can incorporate two-factor authentication, multi-factor authentication, or different hardened security practices inside of the cloud, inside their infrastructure, and things like that. So it's really this question of where do we begin? Where do we begin with thinking about security for Snowflake? We've broken this down to 3 areas, and I think those 3 areas are very relevant as they relate to, again, Snowflake specifically, but some of these are generalities. So if you think about, all right, how is the data being accessed in your current Snowflake account? Is it being accessed by a Python script? Is it being accessed by a third-party system? Are people logging into the user interface? Really cataloging and understanding how data access is happening. And so that's both on the ingress and the egress, right? Because there are situations where you're loading data into the system that you want to prevent overload or overrun, or particular overrun or overload of a particular area that's been designated as sensitive or to hold a specific set of information. So that's your ingress. And then the egress, right? The data coming out, that's your reporting. People are reading and querying the data, if you will. And so who's doing that? What systems are doing that? Because oftentimes a system will be created and then a person might leave the organization. That system becomes relegated. Nobody knows who actually is maintaining or organizing that system or that third party account. And you just have this open access where people are just unsure of what it does or who has access to it directly, or even the passwords and everything that account or that third party system uses. So very important to understand those details. And in our opinion, that starts from day one. And one of the ways you can help mitigate that is by creating service accounts and definitely creating a role-based security control access layer. So instead of, and Snowflake does a really good job at this by making sure that permissions are really assigned at the role level. But there's some other things that your administrator of your Snowflake account can do on top of this. And we'll probably touch on these in a future topic and probably do a deep dive. Then also understanding native Snowflake controls. So native Snowflake controls are there. This goes back to the onus is a little bit on the account holder, not just Snowflake in and of itself. So you can't just go blaming Snowflake when they've given you the controls and you sign a terms of service and it identifies what control they have and what control you have of the account. So if you load up a lot of PII and sensitive information, and maybe this is done by a data engineering team that's fairly novice and maybe doesn't have that on-premise experience, and they are just learning on the job for the most part. They're blogging and they're copying and pasting, and they've convinced the business team or the leadership team that you can securely load data, no problem, but they haven't applied some of these other controls, or they've created users that have very weak passwords. All the same rigmarole applies here in the cloud. And so if you yourself have loaded this PI data and the access for the egress of the data is fairly weak, then when someone is able to attain those credentials or a third party is able to take that information and do something with it that you aren't very clear on what it is happening with that data, then is that really Snowflake as a company problem? Is it their problem, or is it an administrative problem of the account, right? So it's no different than downloading a MySQL or Oracle or Postgres database and using that for production sake, but then having issues with the data access or password control, and then the data coming out of that system is relinquished outside of or with your knowing, but to a third-party agent that does something spurious with that data, or not spurious, but rather not on the up and up. And so that control is a type of control that you have in Snowflake. So really, native controls are things like network policies. So you can create a network policy that identifies specific IP addresses or ranges that can actually access or query the data. So this is one tremendous roadblock for having egress to data. If it's not coming from an IP address that is known to your network, known to your agency, if you will, then Snowflake will block that access before someone can get to the data. Even if the password is compromised, they won't be able to get to the data due to the access of the network restriction based on the network policy. The second one is MFA, so that's that multi-factor authentication, so the 2FA. So right now, the key one that Snowflake uses natively is the Mobile Duo, and so that's on your phone, and that typically applies to only one email address, which will be tied to like one user account, and so that's going to give you your standard, hey, I'm logging in, give me a push or give me a passcode that I need to go to another device, for example, and then enter another code or press a button that says, this is me, I've identified myself on two systems. And so that's that 2FA, that MFA. Now that's hard to spoof, so that's another really good security control. As we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, that control is very important. And what I'm going to show you, something that we have in DLH.io for the visibility, is around identifying particularly account admin roles. So account admin being kind of like that godlike account inside of your Snowflake account, and being able to identify which of those user accounts with that role do not have MFA turned on. So this could be the number one principle that you could apply in your organization today that's going to save you a lot of headache from someone getting complete control and access of your system, and obviously getting at all of your data. So it's very important. And then another one is the private public key concept, and we'll tap on JWT for that as well. And so this is where you've created a secure key credential, where you've created a user like a service account user. You've created a private public key pair. You've given the public key to that particular service account inside of your Snowflake account, and then as you're transmitting data, it's being technically authenticated through that key identification. So it's a little bit stronger than just your standard native user slash password credential. And it's giving you that extra layer of security because chances of someone guessing a private key authentication is very, 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 very low compared to doing something like a rainbow attack against a standard user and a standard password. So those are three things that you can apply today that you have complete control over inside of your Snowflake account. And then the last one, where to begin, right? So if this happened to you, if there's some sort of breach that happened, one of the key things that you could do right now is start a SOC compliance protocol. And that undertaking can vary in size based on size of the company, and based on what you want to identify as protocols and repeatable, access and coordination and processes within you were to get audited, which is part of that SOC process, then you have a repeatable process that says our data is secure because of X, Y, and Z. And X, Y, and Z is identified in the SOC or SOC compliance documentation that you would create, that helps your organization understand things like network policy, uh, password, credential, length and requirements, and other ingress and egress policies that you create for your organization itself. And so it's kind of like you become your own kind of warden for how data and information is input and accessed inside of your Snowflake accounts. And then this document can then be audited by a third party, like a third party accounting firm or third party consulting firm, so that you yourself are not your own governing agency, but you do act as that kind of warden who sets the policies for how things are going to work inside of the account. And so as we think about what SOC compliance is, for your Snowflake account, it's really that documented and practiced process, particularly around security. So service organization controls, or SOC, it really is that voluntary process that is typically around security of information. Now, if you look at Snowflake, the organization itself, they have all sorts of different certifications and qualifications for security, for PII, for HIPAA, for SOC Type 2, ISO certifications. And that is the organization as a whole. And they also have to have Sarbanes-Oxley compliance because they're a publicly traded company now. And we'll talk about that here in that third bullet point. But for you as an organization that is either providing data related services to your internal customers or to your external customers, it is very good for you to have SOC compliancy. So at DLH.io, because we're a SaaS-based company that provides ETL and ELT and data catalog and data governance and data management functionality, we're SOC compliant. So we have a third-party audit that says, hey, anyone that goes to DLH.io and uses data for any reason, we have complete controls around the security of data, how data is accessed, how we deploy code, and things like that. And so you can do the same thing at a lower level for your Snowflake account and your Snowflake org. And so it's super important that you think about this as you move forward in the realm and the presence of the potentiality of breaches of data, of your data. Another good thing about SOC compliance is it really answers questions very, very quickly for anyone that's asking, how do we do this? How do we do that? What's our policy? who owns what happens if this happens. And so that's all documented under this SOC compliance document, which would be a separate document from some of the things that you might have on your SharePoint or your Google Drive or your Box, where you might have a one-pager quick start about security controls. This will be a more comprehensive document that talks about the testing that you do to make sure things that are secure, what type of automation or change controls you have in place, who's your backup for administration of the cloud, or your Snowflake cloud or your org. So you're basically taking this broader concept of SOC compliance, where you might be a product-based company, and you're bringing that down to this individual facet of your organization and your data infrastructure, and you're just applying that to your Snowflake system. And if this data infrastructure for your organization is part of the heartbeat, meaning that as part of that circulatory system for how data and information travels around your organization, if this is a key part of it, then you need to make the investment in doing something like SOC compliance specifically for that area in your organization. And then it often gets confused with SOX compliance with an X, which is the Sarbanes-Oxley control set, which is really a law for publicly traded companies, and really related to the financials. And I won't go into great detail there. You can read about it. You can search them up on Wikipedia. So these are two different things. So if you get into a conversation with someone at your organization and they say, well, we don't need SOX compliance, they might be thinking about the Sarbanes-Oxley ruling. And this is where you just need to educate them on SOC as a standard internal process that you could actually have audited and vetted, either, like I said, for your external customers or even for your internal customers or your board, if you have one of those at your organization. So this is great information. Keep that in mind. Happy to help where we can. Lastly, wrapping up a little bit here. So I'm going to show you a super quick demo on one of the data management features that we have in DLH.io. So again, very apropos to this whole security breach thing with Snowflake. And I think we've helped a number of customers not have a security breach inside of Snowflake just with this one dashboard pane that we have. And so the idea is to start simple on any of the things that I mentioned here today, but the impact is going to be great and very quickly, because you're going to be able to get visibility. You're going to start down the road where you've actually secured your information, and your entire team is just going to feel better about the presence of these controls and these processes. And so definitely take advantage of expertise from partners like DLH.io, who are trying to inform and educate and provide services even for free related to data and data security. So let me just quickly jump over to a high-level demo over here related to this panel here, what we call the Snowflake Control Panel. So if I can just change my presentation scope here, that will allow me to just render out really quickly this idea of the Snowflake Control Panel inside of DLH.io. So this is the DLH.io interface. Some people obviously already know all about it. If you're a current customer, thanks for joining. And the general idea behind this dashboard, as you can see, you might be coming from using the ETL functionality, using one of our 200 plus sources and targets like Snowflake and BigQuery and Redshift, Databricks, and so forth, or data catalog, or some of the data transformations with DBT and some of our internal transformations. But when you navigate to the Snowflake Management tab and feature, you'll see that you have the ability to connect and just get really good basic information about your Snowflake account. So I think this is free on the enterprise tier. You can get a 60-day trial to take a look at this, but anybody who's concerned about security in Snowflake should absolutely have this at their disposal. So this again is just giving you a couple of key feature sets. So like right here, I can see how many active users we have in our Snowflake account, how many users do not have a default role assigned to them, which is also another good thing to have inside of your account. And this is the one right here for our SOC compliance that we have around Snowflake, and that we definitely tell our customers to get on, which is to have any users with the account admin role should have MFA applied, bar none, no exception. And so this is going to tell you on a minute by minute, hour by hour basis how many of those users in your Snowflake account uh, are without MFA. So you're going to be able to get alerted. You're going to be able to get that information right away. And so this way you can act on it very, very quickly, because if there are any users in your system with account admin role, with the account admin role without MFA, you are in, you have a potential for possible breaches in your Snowflake account or in your Snowflake org. So you definitely want to fix that right away. So this identification of that. Also, other things like users with unchanged passwords greater than 90 days. Now, this isn't um, super important, because rolling over passwords for a specific account sometimes doesn't need to happen. But if you're using a service account, or you're using obviously an account with a role that might be a little bit less than account admin, maybe sysadmin, you're going to want to rotate passwords often. And so 90 days is kind of that standard rule of thumb and threshold. And then, of course, if you have users who aren't logged in after a period of time, you're going to want to audit that and identify, and like, why is that? Has someone left the company? And other considerations such as that. And there's lots of other information that we have in here about warehouse usage and roles and users. And if you haven't seen the platform before, please reach out and connect and take a look at a demo. We do demos in between 30 and 45 minutes. If you're a Snowflake customer, this will change your world. It's everything on one platform. I think we have 5 major bits of functionality in the platform, so that you can consolidate your tools into one. You're able to actually manage users from Snowflake, or sorry, from our Snowflake control panel inside of DLH.io and more. So let me just jump back over to the main presentation here, and definitely reach out if you're interested in learning more. Again, like I mentioned, there is a 60-day trial. You can get there, and if you're on the enterprise tier, meaning that you're using some of our ETL or ELT functionality, that automatically comes with it, right? So you don't even have to worry about building yourself, or worry about the trial. That just comes with it. So getting back to feeling good about the data that you're working with, and not making excuses for not knowing this problem exists with security is really no longer allowed. So if you are head of data, if you are CTO, CIO, CDO, you need to solve this problem for your organization. And you don't need to just solve it, you need to document it. And so we highly recommend that you go down that approach of SOC, SOC compliance, for your Snowflake account, especially in light of the alleged data breaches, so that it doesn't happen again. So feel free to contact us, take us up on that free trial, 30 days, 60-day free trial for the Snowflake control panel. That's going to give you a little bit of a SOX compliance helper. It's going to allow you to get started on identifying some of these key things. And no need to build it yourself. We've already built it for you. So go ahead and take advantage of that. Reach out at dlh.io/demo, and look forward to chatting with you. And we really do hope that no one was really impacted or impacted too greatly if the alleged data breach is actually true. And if what happened to be true, we hope you have a speedy recovery, and hopefully as you resume normal operation, you take advantage of some of the things that I've described to you in the session. And hit us up for any type of insider information, as we've been doing this for a very, very long time. Lots of expertise on our team, and that's why we've built the DLH.io platform to help all the customers who might not have this depth of experience related to not only Snowflake, but cloud infrastructure, data warehousing, data lake housing, and more. So thank you guys for joining today, and join us on the next one. We'll probably do some more deep dives on SOC compliance for Snowflake, and also some of the basic native components as well. So as always, I'm Christian Screen, and thank you guys, and stay data driven.